Hi guys, it's Dr. Spooks here. If you enjoy my videos, consider hitting the like button. It's the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. I would really appreciate it. My name is James Lay, and I have been a backpacking guide around the world for most of my life. From the frozen wastes of the Russian tundra to the tropical dense jungles of the Amazon, and damn near everything in between. I always put my clients' needs above my own, even at the cost of my food and water in some instances. Like this one time, I gave up nearly a day's worth of food since my client at the time had forgotten where he stashed food for the return journey from K2. I even gave up my favorite meal to eat spaghetti and meatball. But I am not writing this story to talk about my selflessness by giving up food. Nor am I going to talk about the close calls I had getting clients out of trouble on numerous occasions. No, this story is one that changed me into the person I am today. But let me back up a bit. First, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 2 weeks ago, stage 4. It was unexpected to say the least. Wrestling with my mortality is something I am still working towards as life slowly dwindles from my body. The doctors tell me I could last about 6 months max with treatment, but I elected to opt out of that. I have been here long enough and have done enough to last almost 3 lifetimes. Plus, I want to go out on my own terms. My 55 years on this earth were filled with so many life-fulfilling experiences that they are all almost hard to remember. But one has always been in the back of my mind, haunting my dreams and my waking life like an ever-looming ghost looking to torment me slowly to the grave. I want to share this story before I become too weak to record it for the world to remember. A story of my greatest disgrace, an attempt to reconcile what I have done and let the story of the people I failed to be known for the safety of young and dumb adventurers. I'm omitting my specific location at the time and where I went, but not the names of those involved. Without further ado, I guess this all started roughly 30 years ago. I was a young buck waiting tables in an attempt to save money to be able to move to South America and start my career guiding people on backpacking trips and expeditions throughout the region, and eventually the world. I put everything I had working towards this goal and was going to achieve it no matter what. Spending all my time outside of work and saving money however I could. I ate so many ramen noodles, I was still some ways off from affording the move. So I started advertising myself as a wilderness guide in my area, willing to go anywhere in the Rocky Mountain states for damn near any amount of money. At the time, I was an avid hiker and backpacker, spending all my weekends exploring the local trails, forests, and whatever landscape escaped. That's why I was off the walls excited when I was approached by this brother and sister team who wanted me to guide them through an unknown section of the mountains nearby that had come to their attention. They had learned about me through one of my friends who attended the local university. I asked everyone I knew to help me advertise myself as a hiking and backpacking guide. And it finally paid off with those posters that I politely forced them to hang up for me. They first introduced themselves as Adam and Bethany Della Rosa, 2 wide-eyed, nerdy nature enthusiasts and college students. Adam was tall and a little lanky, sporting an unkempt mustache with trimmed black hair that suited him well. Bethany wore circular-framed glasses, kept her brown hair in a ponytail, had beautiful green eyes, and was short compared to her tall brother. probably a foot of height difference between them. We exchanged pleasantries for a bit before they started telling me that they learned of a potentially unused or forgotten region of the mountains that they were interested in exploring for one of their college classes, something along the lines of a field project they had to complete before they were allowed to graduate. I can't remember the details of it, even though they explained it to me multiple times. All I cared about was getting the experience in with clients. Hearing about this from a friend of a friend sort of deal, whose names all escape me at the moment, elaborating that this would likely be about a week, maybe less, long trip deep into the mountains and forested valley that I was decently familiar with. I had done a few longer trips around a week long, so I had a rough idea of how to prepare for such an adventure. But Adam and Bethany had only been hiking on trails and marked paths in their time, so they wanted someone with more experience on longer trips and with unfamiliar territory. They scraped together a rather generous amount of money up front for me to secure my time and interest in. But I was already interested in this before a down payment of sorts was even mentioned. This was just a bonus. It got me that much closer to my goal after all. Looking back, I should have turned them down, or at least advised them to shorten the trip length, because they weren't ready for such a trip. And neither was I. Nobody could have been ready for what we experienced. The planning for the trip took a couple of weeks, gathering the necessary supplies needed to last about a week in the wilderness. Food, water, camping supplies, things to make fire, and protect ourselves in case of wildlife that got too close. Things of that nature. Fast forward a few weeks to the day of the trip. I took some time off from the I was waiting tables, since the money they scraped together was enough for me to take time off and not lose much money. I needed the break from the job anyway. We carpooled to a local trailhead and were surprised to see it had been closed for a couple of days before we arrived. So we had to park up the dirt road and walk from there. The sign posted by the park ranger said this trailhead was in the process of being shut down since it is sparingly used, and trail conditions have been deteriorating for a while. Like that was going to stop us. They told me precious little about this offbeat route that hardly anyone knew about. I don't ever recall seeing or hearing of such a thing, despite my own visits to this place. Saying their friend of a friend told them it was somewhere between mile 4 and 7, near some trees off trail. Very descriptive when hiking in a forested region such as this. Keeping our eyes peeled, we hiked for about 5 miles on this relatively easy way that looped around one mountain, only to dip into the valley and then back up another. Along the way, we chit-chatted, getting to know each other a little better. They told me about how they both moved away from abusive parents a few towns over, leaving when Bethany turned 18, since Adam was older by about a year and wasn't going to abandon his sister at a house where the abuse would only escalate in his absence. They both decided to go to the same college, being the first in their family to accomplish such a feat. I gave them a small congratulations on being able to escape an abusive household and try to make something of themselves. The conversation quickly shifted after that, though. I remember Bethany going on and on about her love for drawing and painting, while Adam just smiled and nodded as she kept talking. He seemed to be the stoic, quiet type, only talking when he had something to add. That conversation drew to a close after Bethany finished talking about whether she liked painting or drawing more. It ended up being a tie, They began chatting amongst themselves a few feet ahead of me as I was taking a look at a map I brought to get an idea of where this path could be and where it could lead us. Not really paying attention to her footing amidst the conversation, Bethany tripped over a medium-sized rock lodged in the ground, falling hard and fast forward. She got a sizable cut vertically across her right shin over a sharp rock leading uphill. Adam pulled out a small first aid kit to patch his sister up before I could even ask Bethany if she was all right, always ready to help his sister while he was cleaning the wound and applying a bandage. I put my map away for a moment and wandered a bit towards a large, fallen, dead tree about 50 meters away, looking to break off a branch to whittle it down and transform it into my personal hiking stick. I lumbered over to the tree and was scanning for a decent branch to use. And that is when I noticed this tiny dirt groove in the middle of a grove of trees. Another 25 meters beyond the fallen tree, I walked over to it and glanced down the inlet, expanding further into the forested valley downhill. I walked back to Adam and Bethany, who had just finished dressing and treating her wound. They both shot up with excitement and wonder in their eyes when I told them I believed to have found the path they mentioned. You couldn't see it from the main hike, so I could understand why next to nobody knew about this trail. We hurriedly walked over to the passage that curiously seemed to start out of nowhere in the middle of these trees, and began our true journey on a path less traveled. Excitement filling the air between Adam and Bethany as we strode towards our unknown destination. But once starting, I couldn't help but feel this sense of anxiety and doom as I led these two down a path I never heard of or seen before. At the time, I attributed it to the nerves of my first time guiding people, but I was oh so wrong. The map was of little use to me anymore, since I couldn't seem to find this boulevard of dirt anywhere on it. Despite knowing our general location before departing on this offshoot, I only had a vague idea of where we were, and at the time, I thought that was enough. It looked as if nobody had set foot on it in years, barely noticeable while twisting and turning deeper into the forest and further into the valley of the mountains surrounding us. Nature had all but reclaimed this dirt way, as if in an attempt to hide a forgotten secret from the world. The beginning part of this trek was challenging. We wandered off this half-hidden, half-visible route more than once, since it blended in with the surrounding grass and dirt beneath our feet. We couldn't have gone more than a few miles before I decided we needed to make camp for the night, as the sun was setting, and we all deserved a break from this maze-like forestry. I took out my knife and marked a couple of trees right next to the trail, so we would be able to find it the next day. As we went a little off the path until we found a small clearing that was a good spot to rest for the night, Adam and Bethany began setting up their tents as I searched for firewood to get a nice fire going. I returned with arms full of firewood with the sun half set still, and set up my tent as well. There was only a sliver of the sun over the horizon by the time I got my tent set up and the fire going for us all. We enjoyed some dried ration meals and conversations around the warmth of the fire. As the sun was fully set by this point, we talked about what we liked to do in our spare time when they weren't in school, and I wasn't busy hating my job waiting tables. Adam shared he liked casually playing soccer as a goalkeeper, even though due to his tall frame, I would have pegged him as a basketball player. He said he hated basketball and got that all the time along with soccer. Adam told me how he also enjoyed reading in his spare time, one of his favorite books being The Exorcist, the same one that later came out as a movie. Bethany talked our ears off about her hobbies of swimming, even bragging about how she can swim better than her brother, as well as continuing her talk about drawing and painting from earlier that day, which we both happily listened to. It felt nice to talk with people again. I felt for the first time in a while I had made some actual friends, and it filled me with a warmth that a fire couldn't quite do. As the conversation continued, the crackling of wood filled the cool night air as they told me about how they wanted to be some kind of biologist and study nature in its entirety, since they both loved being outside and interacting with life of all kinds when they could. I shared my dream to become a professional guide across the entire world if I could. Also, taking the opportunity to thank them for giving me this opportunity of being a real guide for someone. Our conversations continued as we laughed and joked around the fire for longer than I had anticipated, until it was time that we all retreated to our respective tents for the night. Sleep came easy that night, as the cacophony of nature singing around me hushed me into a dreamless sleep like a lullaby. The following morning, I woke up before Adam and Bethany and began packing away my tent and putting out the fire. I let them sleep a little longer since they had earned it. We exchanged morning pleasantries with one another when they emerged from their tents about 20 minutes later. I waited for them to finish packing up their things while I ate a breakfast bar for some morning energy. I tossed each one from my pack when they finished and told them to eat up while we continued onward. We all walked confidently back on the path to find the knife marks I left on the trees to guide us forward. The night before, finding them in no time at all, the day had officially begun. However, that day was especially difficult as the forest condensed around us the further we ventured forth. It was a rough journey, to say the least. Tree limbs and dense foliage encompassed the entire lane forward, and our progress was slowing close to a crawl as we manipulated our way down the barely visible footpath. We made less progress than I originally thought we would, probably venturing no further than 2 or 3 miles. It seemed almost as if the forested valley itself was trying to stop us from venturing deeper and discovering a terrible secret. The whole day was filled with challenging backpacking and maneuvering through an unforgiving, dwindling forest path with little conversation between us, besides the occasional checking in on everyone and breaks for water and food. It was an exhausting chug through the valley. We happened upon a small opening to the left of the artery of foliage and decided to make camp for the night as the sun was beginning to set. Marking up some trees, as I did the night before, as to not lose our place in the forest. As I gathered firewood just like before, Adam and Bethany set up my tent for me while I was out. In a nice gesture of friendship, I returned to camp delighted to see I didn't have to do so myself, and thanked them for their kind effort, exchanging smiles with them both. The conversation wasn't as lively that night, though. We all had mirrored expressions of exhaustion that spoke more than our words could at that time. We ate our food rather quickly, not even waiting for a blooming blaze to warm it that night, retreating to our tents as hastily as we could to find adequate amounts of sleep for another exhausting day of backpacking. At dawn, sleep would not find us that night. However, since that was when our waking nightmare would begin. At first, the forest was quiet, besides the symphony of crickets and frogs singing out in the night as I laid my head down, trying my best to listen in and have it lull me to sleep. That is when I noticed it, just before sleep had encompassed me. A sound that was barely discernible from the chorus of the forest around me. But the more I focused on it, the more disturbed I became by the noise. It sounded like the low, crying moan of a dying animal. It continued to crescendo in volume until the rest of the forest began to tune out, as my mind honed in on that sound that seemed to be encompassing every corner of my mind. I also wasn't the only one who noticed it. I heard the tents rustling open as we all emerged from our tents to see if anyone had any idea what that noise was that we were hearing. We exchanged glances of curious fear as we attempted to make sense of what we were hearing. It didn't sound like any animal we had heard before, and as we stood around the entrances of our tents, we knew we had to see what was causing it. We could even consider our next move. Something emerged from the depths of the pond. It was a figure, shrouded in darkness, slowly rising from the still waters. At first, it appeared as a vague silhouette, but as it drew closer to the moonlight, its features became more defined. The figure was humanoid, yet its movements were unnatural, jerky, and disjointed. Its skin was pale and translucent, almost like a specter from another realm. We stood frozen in terror, unable to comprehend what we were witnessing. As the figure stepped onto the shore of the pond, we could see its face, or what remained of it. It was contorted in agony, with eyes that glowed a faint, eerie blue. Its mouth opened, emitting a sound that chilled us to the bone. A sound that echoed with centuries of anguish and despair. In that moment, we knew we were in the presence of something beyond our understanding. Something ancient and malevolent. Fear gripped us like a vice, paralyzing our bodies as we watched the figure approach. Adam, ever the bravest among us, stepped forward, brandishing his knife in a feeble attempt to defend us. But it was futile. The figure merely extended a hand, and Adam froze in place, as if held by invisible shackles. Bethany screamed, a piercing sound that shattered the oppressive silence of the grove. But before any of us could react, the figure spoke, a voice that reverberated with power, yet laced with sorrow. "Do not be afraid," it said, its voice echoing in our minds. "We mean you no harm." But despite its words, we could feel the malevolence emanating from the figure, a darkness that threatened to consume us all. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished, leaving us standing in the silence of the grove, shaken to our cores. We knew then that we had stumbled upon something beyond our comprehension, something that defied logic and reason. And as we stood there, gazing into the depths of the pond, we realized that our journey was far from over. But what lay ahead, we could only imagine, and with trembling hearts, we braced ourselves for the horrors yet to come. That abomination emerged from the pond. I knew we were facing something beyond our comprehension. The air grew thick with fear as the creature's grotesque form unfurled before us, its sludge-like body writhing with unnatural movements. Bethany's screams pierced the night air as the creature ensnared her with its tendrils, dragging her closer with each passing moment. Adam and I stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend the horror unfolding before us. But as Bethany's pleas for help echoed through the grove, a surge of adrenaline jolted me into action. With trembling hands, I reached for the knife at my side, praying it would be enough to free Bethany from the creature's grasp. Adam, his face contorted with determination, lunged forward to aid his sister, his own knife glinting in the moonlight. But before either of us could intervene, the creature's tendrils tightened around Bethany's legs, pulling her inexorably closer to its grotesque form. Desperation fueled my movements as I charged forward, slashing at the tendrils with all the strength I could muster. The creature let out a guttural roar, a sound that chilled me to the core, but I refused to back down. With each strike of my blade, I felt a flicker of hope amidst the chaos, a belief that we could still save Bethany from this nightmare. But just as victory seemed within reach, the creature unleashed a torrent of black sludge, enveloping Bethany in its suffocating embrace. I watched in horror as she disappeared beneath the viscous mass, her screams silenced by the darkness. In that moment, I knew we had failed her. Despite our best efforts, we had been unable to protect her from the horrors of this accursed place. And as the echoes of her cries faded into the night, I felt a profound sense of guilt wash over me, a weight that would haunt me for the rest of my days. But amidst the despair, a flicker of determination burned within me. Bethany may have been lost to us, but I vowed to ensure that her sacrifice would not be in vain. With Adam by my side, we would confront this evil head-on, and we would not rest until we had unraveled the mysteries of this cursed grove. For Bethany's sake, and for the sake of all those who had fallen prey to the darkness that lurked within, we would fight on, no matter the cost. Struggled on the ground, his body racked with spasms from the effects of the dust. I could see the terror in his eyes, a silent plea for help that echoed louder than any scream. But I was still rooted to the spot, my limbs refusing to obey the commands of my frantic mind. In that moment, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins, a primal instinct urging me to fight or flee. But as I glanced at Bethany, still trapped in the clutches of the abomination, I knew that fleeing was not an option. I couldn't leave her to face this nightmare alone. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I forced myself to move, each step feeling like an eternity as I approached the writhing mass of darkness that held Bethany captive. The air was thick with the sickly sweet scent of the dust, making it difficult to breathe as I reached out to her, my hands trembling with fear and determination. As my fingers brushed against her skin, I could feel the cold clamminess of her flesh, a stark contrast to the warmth of her touch. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, a silent plea for salvation that tore at my heartstrings. I knew that I had to act fast before it was too late. With a surge of adrenaline, I gripped her wrist tightly, pulling with all my strength as I tried to free her from the creature's grasp. But it was no use. The tendrils held her fast, refusing to relent in their grip. Desperation clawed at my mind as I frantically searched for a way to save her. And then, in a moment of clarity, I remembered the knife at my side. With trembling hands, I drew the blade, its cold steel glinting in the moonlight as I poised it above the tendrils that ensnared Bethany. With a silent prayer on my lips, I brought the blade down with all the force I could muster, slicing through the darkness with a satisfying thunk. And in that moment, as the tendrils fell away, I felt a surge of triumph, unlike anything I had ever experienced before. But our victory was short-lived, for even as I freed Bethany from the creature's grasp, I could sense that our ordeal was far from over. The abomination still lurked in the shadows, its malevolent presence casting a pall over the grove. With a sense of urgency, I scooped Bethany into my arms, her body limp with exhaustion as I carried her away from the pond and back towards the safety of our camp. And as we fled through the darkness, I knew that we would have to stay vigilant, for the creature was still out there, waiting to claim its next victim alone in my bed, haunted by the memories of what had transpired in those dark woods. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of Adam and Bethany, their terrified expressions etched into my mind like a grotesque painting. I tossed and turned, unable to escape the guilt that weighed heavily on my conscience. As the first light of dawn crept through the hospital window, I knew that I couldn't keep running from the truth. I had to confront what had happened, no matter how painful it might be. With a heavy heart, I made my way back to the trail where it all began, each step a painful reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. The forest was eerily quiet, as if it too mourned the loss of those who had fallen victim to the creature in the pond. As I reached the clearing where the pond lay, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air was thick with an otherworldly presence, and I could sense that the creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next unsuspecting prey. But I refused to let fear paralyze me any longer. With a deep breath, I stepped forward, determined to uncover the truth and bring closure to the families of Adam and Bethany. As I approached the edge of the pond, I saw something shimmering in the water, a glimmer of light amidst the darkness. With trembling hands, I reached out and plucked a single silver-white lily from the surface, its petals still glistening with morning dew. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't undo the past or bring back those who had been lost, but I could honor their memory and ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain. With a silent prayer on my lips, I cast the lily into the depths of the pond, watching as it disappeared beneath the surface. And as I stood there, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the forest, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. For in that moment, I knew that Adam and Bethany were at peace, their spirits forever intertwined with the natural world they loved so dearly. And though their loss would always weigh heavy on my heart, I took solace in the knowledge that they would never be forgotten. With one last look at the pond, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the horrors of the past and embracing the promise of a new beginning. And as I disappeared into the depths of the forest, I knew that their memory would live on, a beacon of light in the darkness, guiding me forward on my journey through life. Go and check on that soon. See if it's still there. Maybe I'll take a walk tomorrow. If I remember, maybe I won't. Anyway, I'm running out of smokes, and it's getting dark time to head back to the house and hope for another quiet night by the lake. Going with this, she wanted me to meet her there in a week's time. But why I haven't heard from Mom in years. She'd left us when I was only 9. I stayed with Dad. I have my reasons for doing what I did, but even I can't begin to comprehend what she was thinking. My thoughts went to a dark place. Then I saw the way she flinched when I said yes. I'd go. She was scared of me. Or was it something else who could blame her? Maybe it's just my presence in general when you've been away from the world for so long. Any little disruption can throw you off balance. I'd gotten used to it though. But Mom was Mom. She was a godsend. Even if it took her over 20 years to get here. I wonder what Dad would say if he knew she was here. He'd have a conniption. He'd march her off the property with barely a hello. Even if it was someone he loved. He would never understand my dad. He was a good man. He had his demons, though. They say that's where I get it from the hot temper. The hot temper and the penchant for drink. Maybe. That's true. But it was also Dad who taught me to be kind to others, to do right by people, even if they didn't deserve it. He tried to teach me to do the right thing to be the better man. But I guess that didn't stick. I had so much going for me back then. I was popular. I had friends. I had a bright future ahead of me. But it all came crashing down in one fateful night. Everything I built, everything I worked for, gone in an instant. And now, I'm here stuck in this solitary existence, with nothing but my thoughts and the occasional visit from a loved one I never thought I'd see again. I suppose I should be grateful for the company, even if it does bring up painful memories and unresolved emotions. But hey, at least I'm not alone, right? Yeah, at least I'm not alone. Going there was that playground right at the back. And you wanted to go on the spinning disc, the big grippy one with handles, where a bunch of kids like you could all squeeze on and have their dads spin it around. Graze the skin off my knees, Mom snorted, her eyes drifting as the memory replayed in her head. Even if I was only a boy then, just thinking of it made me embarrassed. Embarrassment? I'd left that on the curb a long time ago, but it was fast and relentless enough to catch up with me when it needed to. And you were insistent, so me and your dad let you ride it. If they gave out awards to kids who could scream loudest, you'd get the gold medal. By the time it had stopped, you were all frozen up, frozen solid. You'd have a trophy for the boy with the strongest grip, too. I mean, really. It even took Dad some effort to pry you off of there. Looking back at the past was itself a thing of the past. A thought that was emboldened as I stared across the lake to where the other side used to be. And still, I laughed along with her. There are gems to be found in the mud. And although I'm never willing to dig for them myself, I'll gladly watch another get their hands dirty so I can reap the rewards. Mom went on for a while, reminiscing, flooding me with nostalgia. I was happy she'd come. I think if it were anybody else, I'd have cast them right back into the lake. Maybe she knew that. I was happy until she thrust the shovel into the grave of the very thing I hoped I'd buried deep enough to forget. In the same soft voice, she asked me, "Do you know what it's like to die of thirst?" A crack formed. "Do I what, Mom?" "Oh, it's nothing really. Your skin goes all rough and dry, and your tongue gets scalloped and swells up like your mouth's full of wool. I found out what water sucked out of a concrete wall tastes like, though there wasn't much anyway, even if it was raining out. If If you went back there today, you'd probably find the bits of my teeth that were chipped and scraped off. The crack widened into a fissure. Mom's voice was lower now, scratchy, though some of the warmth remained, if that was ever real, and I don't know if it was. How was your getaway, sweetie, to Ben's cabin? Did you have fun? Did you relish in entrapping me in the basement before you left? I'm sure you did. You probably got off on imagining me scared, confused, and dying. Mountains split and fell to the chasm as it gaped open. It all came rushing back. The garage door opening and closing. Rushing outside to get in Ben's car. And stopping at the last second to make sure everything was locked up, including the basement door, left ajar with the key still in the lock. Mom, why? I bit back my words as she turned and fixed me with two completely dead eyes. There wasn't a hint of emotion in them, even as her eyelids drooped. Her lips, however, were curled into a faint smile. When she spoke, her voice this time was a rabid hiss, like she couldn't keep up with her own words, or her lungs weren't working right. Why? Why what? What right do you have to ask that, you pasty little creep? She leaned in, arching unnaturally towards me to match the growing hate in her voice. I tried to back away, but my body wouldn't listen. If you were just 1 hour, one hour earlier, I'd have lived. But we wouldn't want that now, would we? Oh no, the poor troubled boy has to get his kick somehow. That isn't you. We're all ready, Mom contorted. Here's the corrected text for the second segment. Her face twisted into a bitter mockery of concern. Eyebrows sloped and lips pursed. What was it, honey bun? Was Daddy too distant, too cold? Was it that fat lump of lard who bullied you at school? Or were you just born this messed up? I found my voice and cried out, "Stop it! It wasn't my fault. I'm sorry. This just served to animate her further. She reared up, coiled all out of shape. I heard the crackle of dry skin, the color of ash, and when she opened her mouth, her lips split and oozed a foul black fluid. This time, my body replied, and I twisted away, jamming my palms into the sand. Before I could get up, bowed fingers latched around my forearm and held me tight. I looked down. Mom had caught me and dug her coarse, filthy nails into my skin. It burned. It burned so bad that an electric shock went all the way up my arm, and I swear I heard flesh sizzling. Without moving her shoulders, her neck stretched out so we were at eye level. In a voice like spiders burning in a fire, she said, "Oh, sweetie, it's okay. You've got an ouchie, don't you? I know what'll make you feel better. Come, get a kiss from dear old Mama." "Shut up," I screamed, thrusting my arms out to shove her away. When my hands drove into her ribs, she stopped, looked down at my hands, and then back up to me with a smile. Then Mom disintegrated. And no, I don't mean she just vanished. If only it had been that easy. The form and shape of my mother collapsed into a mass of tiny, writhing bodies. They looked like some kind of crustacean, little translucent shrimp things that hopped around like fleas on a hot plate and swarmed back to where they came from, back to the lake and into its depths. I don't know why I even wrote about this. It hurt, and still does. A disgusting horde of water bugs talked with me for a solid 30 minutes, and I believed it was Mom. At least I know it wasn't her, but the damage is done. I was so close to burying that memory forever and forgetting what I'd done. I'm staying inside for the rest of today. I can't go near there right now. At least I can see it from this window. Not a ripple in sight. I can see the car too. It's pretty. But when I look at it now, all I think of is sitting in the driver's seat, parked in the driveway, watching faceless people carrying a stretcher with a long black bag on it. I don't think I moved for a full 24 hours. Not until the taxi dropped Dad home after he flew back from Japan. The only reason he gave me his Chevrolet is so I could be gone by the morning and never come back. In a few days, I'll be back down by the lake. I know it. I'm also pretty sure some of those shrimp things got on me, so I'm keeping an eye out around the house. Okay, I'm done. I've spent the last of what I have writing this. I feel like curling into a ball under my bed. They're in the house. I swear I checked myself up and down. Damn near burned my skin off in the shower. But they still got in somehow. I crushed the bastards. But some got away. And I don't know where they're hiding now. Whatever the hell these crab shrimp creatures are, it looks like there has to be a lot of them to camouflage themselves. I haven't seen them try to take the form of a person or anything else. But if I leave them too long, well, I'm not going to do that. It's been 3 days since I last wrote. I've been too afraid to leave. Afraid of those things breeding in unchecked corners. But I need to get out. I can't stay inside. The walls are heavy. The ceiling's pressing down on me. Dusk is coming. I'm going down to the lake to a spot as far from the overhang as possible. I need to see the lake before it gets dark. To stare into the vanishing point where it kisses the clear sky. This time, though, I'm bringing this paper. If there's anything new or noteworthy, I want to record it as I see it. I made my way out to one of the big marine boulders in the water, an island of its own, although it isn't very comfortable. I never usually come out here, but I haven't seen any of those bugs. It's pretty dark, though. At least I can see the stars. The stars, they're so far away. When I look up at them, it's like I'm dreaming, wondering what it would be like to be one, off in some hidden away nebula in the corner of an unnamed galaxy. I think I'll just stare a while. The reflections are gone. I don't know what happened, but the lake is dark and muddied, ignorant of the night sky. There isn't a star reflected on its surface. That's okay though, I guess. The lake just gets like that sometimes. I don't like to look at it when it's like that. I'd rather admire the stars. It's getting cold, so I'm going inside to sleep this off. Ever since those things masquerading as Mom paid me a visit, every day has felt like a nightmare. Hopefully, I'll wake up from it by the morning. Out what it was, aside from, well, a blot that was dark. Whatever it was, I could tell it was approaching the shore, approaching me. Soon, it became obvious that the shape was above water. Not a thing of the lake, but of land. It was a boat, and the natural conclusion would be that someone was sailing that boat. They're close now. From the rate they've been sailing at, I'd give them a good 20 minutes before they get here. Let's see if I'm right. I would bet on it, if only there was someone to bet against. Oh, my smoke's gone out. Damn, got ash on the page too. What the hell? My ears just started ringing, and it felt like thumbtacks were being driven into my temples. They waved. At first, I didn't register it as such, but they waved at me. How is this possible? I didn't think. Oh no, they just called out my name. He knows my name. How does he know? Who told him? When? What do I do? If he can come here, anyone can. No, that can't be right. He's here. So good news and bad. The good news is that he wasn't those shrimp things. He's real, a real honest-to-God human being. And out of anyone he could have been, guess who? Ben. It's Ben. I didn't even remember him until those things mentioned him. It hurt to see him after so long. I can't help but associate him with the memory. The memory of what I did to my own mother. My rock. He moored the boat to a piece of dead tree jutting out near the shoreline that didn't look remotely stable. Then jumped out and stood there for a while, taking in the surroundings. The lake house. My house. After he was done admiring the place, he turned in my direction and made his way over. That? Why am I paraphrasing? I remember it exactly. These things don't happen often. That is to say, they never happen. So when they do, it's only natural that the memory of it is near photographic, word for word. Ben looked me in the eyes as he said, "Nice place. It's, comfortable." I broke from staring and shifted my gaze to the ground. It didn't feel good looking at him. The familiarity was scalding. "Yeah, you come down here a lot?" Still staring down into round gray pebbles, I frowned. "Yeah, I can see why, man. It's just serene." Ben peered out across the lake, while my eyes stayed confined to the long-ago smoothed stones. Everything seemed so loud. I heard every breath he took, like it was played through a stage amp. The silence was worse, so I broke it first. "How'd you get here, Ben?" "Well, I mean, by boat, obviously. But how long did it take? And how did you even know where to?" "Dude, I didn't come all this way so you could hear me moan and groan about how awful it was. And yes, it was. But this isn't about me. I miss you, man. And I'm not alone. We all miss you. You don't have to be alone either. And I know you may not think so, but we still care." My eyes pulled away from the ground, and I looked at Ben. I looked long and hard into his eyes. God, those eyes. There was no falsity there, and no doubt either, regardless of how hard I searched for it. Still, it wasn't enough. I'm fine here. This is my peace. If you cared, you'd accept that. Ben paused for a moment, long enough for a smile to creep across his face. It wasn't like Mom's smile, bitter and lifeless. It was only hopeful, and just as genuine as those eyes still were. "I do now." He was the one to look down at the ground. "I know you're relaxed here, but is that all you want?" To relax? I know what it's like. After a while, I would start to worry about whether I'd be able to, instead of actually relaxing. You spend too long in your own company, and it gets stagnant. That sharp pain in my head shot back. I didn't like it because pain makes me angry. All I could muster as a reply was a simple, quiet grunt. "Look, I want to help you, but I can only help you if you want to be helped." Shock flashed across Ben's face, quickly replaced by something more sympathetic. No, not sympathetic. Pitying. More of the same thing I'd been supplied with in abundance my whole life. "I don't need it. I'm sorry and all that. You came this far for nothing. Please go." He stuttered like he wanted to try and change my mind, but he gave up. "Fine, but I'll be back again. And not because I expect you to decide differently, just because I still care." With that, he boarded his vessel and untied the knot. The boat drifted out onto the lake. Ben standing and watching me with that ever-present smile of his, only now with the barest tinge of defeat that stopped it from reaching his eyes. He'd left at my request. That alone sort of left me dumbstruck, because I wanted him to change my mind. I want so desperately for someone to do it for me. And I just sent that someone packing. Maybe I'm more like Dad than I thought. And what he said about relaxing, he's absolutely right. I can't deny it now. The words have been spoken and acknowledged, but he's coming back, and that sets my heart at ease, because as distant as the past has become, the future might be making a turn. Left, right, doesn't matter as long as it gets me off this road. I just hope it isn't a U-turn. Ben, when are you coming back? It's been 2 days, and there's nothing out on the lake. He probably forgot. Yeah, that sounds right. I know I keep calling it a lake, but now it's really more like an ocean. There's nothing to be seen shore to the flat skyline. Actually, wait, I need to check something. I think someone's here with me. It was bad enough when I came out and found the road, or where our road should have been, entirely swallowed up by lake water. But what sent me into shallow breaths was the flattened grass running down the bank beside the gravel drive. The Chevrolet's gone. Something pushed it into the lake. I can't see it, but where else could it be? Doesn't matter. I wasn't put. Responsibilities took precedence. However, on one fateful day, I found myself driving down that familiar highway once again, passing by the old stone windmill. It stood there, unchanged by time, yet somehow more ominous than ever before. The memories of that childhood adventure flooded back to me, and despite my rational mind telling me to keep driving, curiosity got the better of me. I parked my car on the shoulder of the road and approached the windmill cautiously. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, and I could feel the weight of the rumors and legends surrounding this place pressing down on me. With each step, the windmill seemed to grow taller, casting a long shadow over the desolate field. As I reached out to push open the creaky door, a voice called out from behind me, causing me to jump in surprise. Turning around, I saw an old man standing there, his weathered face etched with lines of wisdom and experience. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "This place holds secrets best left undisturbed." I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The allure of the mystery was strong, but the warning in the old man's eyes gave me pause. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to sound brave despite the tremor in my voice. The old man sighed, as if he had been expecting this question. "I am the guardian of this land, tasked with protecting its secrets from prying eyes. But you do not belong here. Leave now before it's too late." His words sent a shiver down my spine, and I knew that I should heed his warning. Turning away from the windmill, I quickly made my way back to my car, the feeling of unease lingering long after I had driven away. And so, the old stone windmill remained a mystery, its secrets hidden away behind its crumbling walls. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls and the shadows dance, I can't help but wonder what lies within, waiting to be discovered. Another. I reached the door and pushed it open with a creak that echoed through the night air. The interior of the windmill was exactly as I had expected, dusty and cobweb covered with a faint smell of mildew lingering in the air. I shone my flashlight around, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. Just empty space and a rickety staircase leading up to the second floor. I hesitated for a moment before steeling myself and starting to climb. Each step creaked beneath my weight. sending shivers down my spine, but I pressed on, determined to confront whatever fears lay waiting for me at the top. As I reached the second floor, I paused to catch my breath before shining my flashlight around once again. The room was empty, save for a few old crates and barrels pushed to one side, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I turned to leave, but then something caught my eye, a glint of metal in the corner of the room. Curious, I made my way over and bent down to inspect it. What I found made my blood run cold. Lying in the dust was an old, rusted key covered in cobwebs and dirt. A chill ran down my spine as I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It was then that I heard it, a soft whispering echoing through the windmill's walls. At first, I thought it was just the wind. But then, the whispers grew louder and more insistent until they were almost deafening. I stumbled backward, dropping the key, as the whispers seemed to surround me, closing in from all sides. I knew I had to get out of there, and fast. I turned and bolted down the staircase, taking them two at a time, my heart pounding in my chest. I burst out of the windmill and into the cool night air, gasping for breath as I stumbled back to my car. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the darkness of the windmill's doorway. As I drove away, I couldn't help but glance back at the lone structure disappearing into the distance, my fear of it stronger than ever before, but also a strange sense of curiosity lingering in the back of my mind. Perhaps one day I would return and uncover the secrets hidden within the old stone windmill. But for now, I was content to leave them undisturbed and to continue on with my journey to see my father. Realization dawned on me. This wasn't just an old, abandoned windmill. This was something much darker, something sinister. I stumbled back in horror, tripping over a loose floorboard and falling to the ground. My heart raced as I scrambled to my feet and made a run for the door. But as I reached it, I heard a low, guttural growl behind me, freezing me in my tracks. I turned slowly, my flashlight shaking in my hand, to reveal a figure emerging from the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, with sunken eyes, and a twisted grin that sent chills down my spine. It stepped forward, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it wasn't quite human. I backed away slowly, my mind racing with fear and confusion as I searched for a way out. But the figure blocked the doorway, its grin widening as it moved closer. I could feel its breath on my neck, its eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I knew then that I was in the presence of something truly evil, something that had been lurking in the shadows of this old windmill for far too long. I screamed as it lunged towards me, its hands reaching out to grab me. But before it could reach me, everything went black, and I felt myself falling into darkness. I woke up sometime later, lying on the ground outside the windmill, my head pounding and my body aching. I stumbled to my feet and ran as fast as I could back to my car, my mind reeling with the horrors I had witnessed. I didn't stop driving until I reached the safety of my own home, but even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. Passed by, never given a second thought. But what if those landmarks held secrets dark and sinister secrets hidden from the eyes of the world? What if there are more windmills out there, more places where evil lurks in the shadows, waiting to strike. I can't shake the feeling that there are more stories waiting to be uncovered, more horrors waiting to be revealed. And as I sit here in my father's home, grieving for the loss of my father and the innocence I once had, I can't help but wonder what other nightmares lie just beyond the edge of our perception. It sounds like you've encountered something truly terrifying and out of the ordinary. Your description of the giant skeleton in the woods is chilling, and it's understandable that you're feeling scared and desperate for help. While I can't offer a definitive explanation for what you've experienced, it's important to prioritize your safety. Given the urgency of your situation, I would recommend trying to contact emergency services again, even if they initially dismissed your concerns. Explain the situation as calmly and clearly as possible, emphasizing that you fear for your safety and that there may be a dangerous entity in the area. In the meantime, stay hidden and try to remain as quiet as possible. Keep your phone nearby in case you need to call for help again, or communicate with anyone who might be able to assist you. If you have any means of defending yourself, such as a rifle, make sure it's readily accessible in case the situation escalates. It's also a good idea to document your experience as thoroughly as possible, as you've done here. This information may be helpful for authorities or anyone else who is trying to understand what's happening in the area. Above all, stay vigilant and prioritize your safety. I hope that help arrives soon and that you're able to make it through this ordeal unharmed.